Well, hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the You Are Not the Thinker channel in recovery. Yeah, you are not the thinker. And we talked about step 1, step 2, and step 3. Step 1 being we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. And addiction was defined as obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior. And the symptoms of addiction could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be food, it could be drama, it could be power, it could be whatever it is at the time in the moment that's causing the individual or the group to become insane. To become insane. That being said, we talked about step 2. And step 2 is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity and not would. Could. And that power greater than oneself or even the collective, we'll start off with addiction, obsessive and compulsive thinking. And that being said, some of the symptoms could be the same, all the way down to rioting, destructive behavior, or whatever it is that's that the individual or the collective is demonstrating the insanity in that moment. Yeah. My stream. So that being said, I lost my stream for a minute, but it's back. So that being said is that then understanding that a power greater than ourselves is not a higher power in terms of the program and and in the progression of healing and getting better. Why? Because a power greater than oneself is an influence in the moment. It's an influence, whereas a higher power is a central or center or the center of an energetic or spiritual thought, behavior. Yeah. So it's or one's activities, spiritual in a spiritual sense. So that being said, that's what makes the difference between a higher power and a power greater than oneself. And then at the same time, why would we have one step that's talking about that's representing 2 steps? Why would 2 and 3 be the same steps? Yeah. So anyway, but as we continue to talk or go over this, we're gonna actually, see some parallels and some differences. So moving on to step 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Now understand, and God is also referred to as a higher power. But it's not in the religious sense, in any type of a religion, such as Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or Christianity. That's not the word God in the recovery sense only refers to a central point for a collective, a central point or a central understanding. So the word God is used. Understand too that in a lot of the literature, it's even noted that it says, for example, in the NA book, it says The God of our understanding, and I'm just paraphrasing it, is not based on dogma. So it's not based on any religious sense. And I think what happens is a lot of people, or there's a lot of people that when they look at the God, in their thinking, they automatically view what has been taught to them from childhood, or what they heard, or even what they heard in meetings. But in the spiritual sense, the God, this is not that God. But that also goes to show that the thinking, the addictive thinking has taken over. Yeah. Addictive thinking, or the disease of addiction / alcoholism, don't stop because you work in steps. Matter of fact, it might even intensify a little bit, but it's only after you get to a certain point that the addiction becomes, that the individual or the group becomes aware of the disease of addiction and how it has affected their thinking and what it is they're really trying to do, and that's recover. And that's why the keys to the steps, what I believe would always be honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And honesty doesn't mean telling the truth. That's only just a segment of it. There's another part to honesty in the recovery sense. One part is telling the truth, and the other part is a consistent behavior with that verbal statement of the so-called truth. And then it's open-mindedness, being subjective or objective to what you're hearing and what you're reading. Because understand this, if the disease is in your mind, closed-mindedness will be what the individual will be experiencing and may not even know it. Yeah. Step 2 is the open-minded step. The book also, the basic text, the big book, also informs us that what we know about the truth is subject to change. It's subject to change. So being equipped with the honesty, the open-mindedness, and the willingness, and then looking at the steps 1, steps 2, and steps 3, then the individual is what? Or the group or collective is ready what? To take an inventory. And what is going to be in the inventory? And understand that also in the basic text, this inventory is not based on morality, or even though it says a moral inventory, moral could be also used as being honest. Because when a lot of times what happens when people do the 4th step is they start writing down their guilt and their shame and their victimization, victimization of what has happened to them and what they did to others. And what is happening is the ego is at work, because like I talked about yesterday or on my previous video, which was step 3 and step 2, on how the ego sets in. And it's 2 parts of the ego. It's the superior ego and it's the victim ego. The superior ego is one facet of the ego where the individual or the collective talks about how they're superior than others. And then you have the victimized ego, where that ego is, oh, so many things done happen to me that's bad. I'm just so worse off than anybody else. And not only do we see it with collectives, we also see it in groups that have been victimized. And we could talk about, just go over the map of the planet. And we could talk about genocidal attempts, slavery. We could talk about mass executions of people. And these people do have a right. But what happens is their ego from being victimized is what they place in the forefront to have a justification to do whatever it is that they want to do. And we also see this around the planet. We see it in the Middle East. We can see it in Africa. We can see it in the United States. We can see it in India. We can see it in Asia. We can see it wherever you look, where there's a people that's been victimized. So the bottom line is the object in the recovery, one of the main objects in the recovery process is to neutralize the victimization, neutralize it. Because what people tend to do is groups and individuals and collective, they take their victimization and they put it in front of them to justify a thought. And understand, you are not the thinker. So it's two sides of the ego. And so what and what happens in the recovery process, where a lot of different groups and individuals or collectives and individuals, when you begin to work on their ego, whether it's their superior ego or their victimized ego, they tend to run away from recovery because what's happening is their personality they feel is threatened, or the ego feels like it's being threatened. And what does the ego tend to do? Well, the ego tends to do is like anything else, defend itself. And since the ego is directly connected to addiction, obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior, then the collective and the groups will abstain from recovery. Understand this. When Hitler viewed the 12-step process, he banned it in Germany based on what? On anonymity. When he saw that word anonymity, and you read this in Mein Kampf, that book that he wrote, he said that anonymity, and I'm just paraphrasing it, he says that anonymity could never take root into the Germanic people because they were a superior race. That's why anonymity, he had banned the 12 steps or a version of the 12 steps. Yeah, that was back in the 40s or whenever he was in power. But there was a version out then. So moving on. Step 4. Step 4. Like I was saying in step 4, is not to just write out, like what happened to you and what you did and so forth. Step 4 is to show a pattern of thinking and how it developed. And it's based on the experiences that happened to the individual or the collective. That's what step 4 is about. It's not about, I got raped, my daddy left me and I ain't had no money and, my mama beat me up. It's not based on that. I left my kids and I was a poor mother or a poor father. I went to jail. No. What it is designed to show a pattern of thought and how it began and how it developed. And why do I say that? Because you look at step 5, and step 5 tells you that we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the what? The exact nature of our wrongs. And where do we get the exact nature? And where do we get the wrongs from? Well, it all started in the first step. If you have a first step inventory, and many of us do, especially if you're going by the workbook, it works how and why, commonly known as the flat book. That's where your inventory starts. And then even if you look at some of the made up worksheets, what happens is the authors of those worksheets are showing a pattern. And what's the pattern? It's a thought pattern based on behavior. Yeah, that's what it is. But what happens is, because of the guilt and the shame that individuals and collectives tend to feel, they actually take the behavior and they get caught up, obsessed in what they done. And they don't look at the thinking. They look at the doing first. And that's why I say you are not the thinker. The disease is the thinking. It's thinking for you. It's the tail wagging the dog. And it's expressed in symptoms. The food, the gambling, the sex, the drugs, and the alcohol, and why. And let's talk about why for a minute. But let me back up. Even the professional says that the usage of the things that I just talked about only make up to 10% of the addiction. So what makes up the rest? If the symptom only make up 10%, and some say 20, some say 15, some say 10. So if it only make up 10% of the addiction, what is the rest? Somebody please tell me. Somebody please tell me. And then there's another thing I want to add. There's a certain comfort. There's a certain comfort that individuals have and collective has on their symptoms. You know, it was reported in one material that I got. It says that the symptoms of the disease of addiction, which covers a lot of areas, without those symptoms, we would have probably a lot of social outbursts. But because people are using drugs, people are using alcohol, people are eating the food, people are gambling, then they have the symptoms help them take their mind off their problems and what's going on around them. And that's very much true. Because if you had a lot of sober people going around here, you probably would have a lot of rebellion going on as a result of the status of the society and the politics of what's going on right now. So that's why a lot of governments push the addiction. The symptoms of the addiction. Gambling. Takes your mind off your problem. Sex. Take the mind off your problem. Eating. Take your mind off the problem. Drugs. Take your mind off the problem. Alcohol. Take the mind off the problem. Working. Take the mind off what's going on around you. You become more unconscious. You go into the more sleep. Television, movies, violence. So addiction, and then you got people that only think it's just drugs and alcohol. So what's happening is the consciousness of the people is very much asleep. And those that have the egos, whether it's the positive ego or the negative ego, they still have enough ego. They're inside their own cloud nine too. And the people that's really dealing or that's really going day to day are the ones that are quote unquote sober or clean. And I use both terms. So before going into step two, before going into step four, I believe one must sit back, review the following 3 steps, all the way down to the open-mindedness, the honesty, and the willingness before they proceed. Yeah, and meditate. Because what's about to happen is the next level and the next phase of of you coming from, you're going to become from more of an unconscious state to a conscious state, to a state of awareness, to a state of enlightenment. And some people just going to stop at being in a conscious state. Some people going to want to stay asleep. They ain't going to want to mess with this. Why? Because individuals and collectives have to come into a certain amount of reality. And reality is light. And a lot of people not going to want to mess with it. And one thing about the 12-step process, it slowly brings the individual into a state of consciousness, to a state of awareness, to a state of enlightenment. That's what it's designed to do. But what has happened is the religious dogma has infiltrated 12-step programs. And it's not the programs that they have infiltrated. It's the fellowships. It's a flaw in the fellowships. And with these flaws, people tend to go back to sleep through their dogma, theological beliefs. Yeah, this is what's going on. And we hear it at meetings, a lot of the confusion. So anyway, let's get back to the step 4. Step 4 is a step of honesty. It's a step of honesty. It's a step of open-mindedness, and it's a step of willingness. And what it's asking you to do, it says we took, wait a minute, where's my book? Here it is. It says we made, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. A fearless. And the fearless, and it says we means mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, also as a collective. And the inventory is a thinking inventory. Why? Because the disease of addiction is a thinking disease. It's not a disease of no substance. Like people like to think. It's a disease of the mind. It's a disease of the mind. And so this inventory is designed for you to look at your mind and your thought patterns and process and how they develop. That's what this thing is all about. Yes, sir. So before we move into step 4, a review of the first 3 steps should be done thoroughly, more than once. That's right. Because without these three to stand on, that fourth step is going to be flawed. It's going to be flawed anyway, especially if it's your first one, your second one, and your third one. That's right. It's going to be flawed, but it's going to be better and thorough. It'll get thorough and honest each time the individual do it. Each time the individual and the collective do it. So I want to back up before I end this part, and then because tomorrow I'll be talking about step 4. We'll be talking about step 4. But looking at the disease of addiction and the thought process, I'm saying the first 3 steps need to be looked at again. There needs to be some identification, some personal identification. And the sponsor or the guide through this particular step, I suggest, should have done it at least 5 times. I wanted to say 3, but I'll say 5. Now here's the deal. Here's the deal. When this step, when the reviews, not the 4th step, when the review is done, and let me make myself plain because I just thought about something. The person that I reviewed the first 3 steps with should have done the steps 3 to 5 times. Yeah, 3 to 5 times. And what happens is and also you're gonna need a person that don't look at the first step and the second step the same. Yeah. That's going to be very, very important. So if you spend, for example, 2 weeks doing the first step, 2 weeks doing the second step, 2 weeks doing the third step, then you should spend at least 2 weeks in review. That's right, in review. So wrapping this thing up, we've been talking about this for almost 30 minutes now. Understand that you'll get to a certain point and you'll see how the disease of addiction has affected 99.9% of any society, neighborhood, block, because everybody's addicted. Everybody. I can't think of one segment of one person that's not. That's just me personally. And how I know, because I'm identifying with you. Yeah. So anyway, you are not the thinker. The goal and the purpose of this is to show that you are not the thinker. And that in order to get to a point to where you become the thinker is that you have to learn how to observe your thoughts. And the only way you can observe your thought effectively is to see where they came from. And then get past the denial that some shit that you think you ain't. And I say this, right? I don't know personally anyway, one person that I could think of that's out here thinking for themselves. I don't care who you is. I can't think of one person. Not one. That's how deep it is. But I also say some is sicker than others, and some is sicker than most. That's right. So we're going to come back. We're going to be doing step 3. And that's it. My channel is I'm not trying to make it popular, no, you know, get all them subscribes and all that. But I will put the bell up every time I put out a new video. You can hear, you can click on it. You can do what you want to with it. But I'm just putting information out. I don't give a damn what happened to it personally, because I'm all right. But I do believe you have to, in order to keep what you got to give it away. In order to keep what you got to give it away. So thank you. I'd like to say to the ones that's tuning in on me, you know, regularly, I hope you're getting something. And that's all I got to say. We'll be on tomorrow talking about this thing called addiction. And you are not the thinker. And understand this, you ain't the thinker. You're not the thinker. Yeah, you might have some accomplishments. Yeah, you may not have none. But at the end of the day, buddy, at the end of the day, you caught up in the disease of addiction. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. And you